Sure. Well, I mean, the violations by the United States within their own country and against their own people are multiple. And this is something that is unknown to most Americans because their oppression has been normalized for them. The injustice committed by their government against them and by the private sector against them has been normalized to where they think that it is perfectly normal and that there's nothing wrong with it. But when you look at the actual statistics, for example, the statistics of violence in the United States, it's absolutely off the charts. The number of, what was it, 650, over 650 mass shootings just last year? 650 mass shootings. That's not 650 victims. That's 650 mass shootings with a mass number of victims in each one. You look at the number of people who are murdered by gun violence, just gun violence, not other kinds of violence. And you have plenty of different types of violence in the United States, but just by gun violence, the numbers are astronomical. It doesn't even compare to a war zone. The numbers don't even compare to a war zone. You would be safer in a war zone. You'd be safer in a combat zone than you are in any American city, if you look at the numbers. And then if you look at the numbers of extrajudicial killings by the security forces, which is what you would call it if it happened in any other country, but when it happens in the United States, they just call it police shootings. And they can decide whether that police shooting is justified or unjustified, and just act like it was a mistake. Or they can do their version of exactly what the Israelis do when they decide to bomb a hospital or bomb a school or bomb a clinic or bomb an orphanage or just bomb a residential neighborhood. The Israelis will say there were terrorists there. That's their version of the same thing that the American police do when they decide to shoot an unarmed innocent person, when they say, oh, we thought that his phone was a gun, or we thought that he was armed, we thought he had a knife in his backpack, or we thought that pen he had in his hand was a weapon, we thought it was a gun, so we shot him. It's exactly what the Israelis do, and they learned it from each other. I mean, as we all know, many of the police forces in the United States are actually trained by the Israelis, or they do joint training with one another. I don't know who's teaching who, to be honest. But the number of police shootings, so-called police shootings, extrajudicial killings by the security forces in the United States was over 1,200 just last year. Over 1,200 of you, American citizens, I assume that many of the people who are in this live are American citizens. Over 1,200 of you were murdered last year by your security forces who are supposed to be serving and protecting you. But instead of serving and protecting you, they're murdering you. And who knows, Allah forbid, but anyone who's watching this live may be next. Because this is what they do. You're supposed to be able to be protected from all of those gun violence, from all that gun violence, from those tens of thousands of people who are murdered every year in gun violence in the United States. You're supposed to be protected from that by the security forces. Instead, if you get in any danger in your neighborhood, if you're in the wrong neighborhood, and by the wrong neighborhood, everyone knows what I mean. I mean a neighborhood of people who don't look like me. I'm talking about a neighborhood of people who come from the global majority. People who are called minorities in the United States, even though they're members of the global majority. If you live in one of those neighborhoods and you get into any kind of a problem, if you're in any kind of danger, the last thing you want to do is call the police. If you call the police, the one who calls 911 is the one who's going to be ended up taken away in an ambulance because he got shot by the police. And you know what I'm talking about, and you know that it's true. This is the situation that you have in the United States, and it's systematic, it's systemic, it's organized, it's planned, because you can't look at the numbers, you can't look at the percentages with regards to victimization by the so-called security forces. You can't look at those numbers and think it's coincidental and think it's accidental. This is clearly systematic. The targeting of so-called minority communities, the so-called minority groups, and the so-called minority population in the United States are being targeted by the criminal justice system, being targeted by the prison industrial complex to be either shot And if they can't shoot you, then they'll arrest you and they'll put you in jail, whether you're guilty or not. And we just saw what happened with Brother Khalifa Marcellus Williams, where the man was innocent, but they insisted to murder that man. The state insisted to murder that man. Well, in that particular case, that governor should be tried at The Hague. That's a crime against humanity. That's systematic state-sponsored terrorism. And the same goes for your so-called security forces, your police forces, or what have you, that are sent out into the streets on a specific mission. And you can ask any so-called minority, whether it's African American or Latino or what have you, who works for the police or who works in the corrections facilities, who works in any aspect of the criminal justice system, and if they've been doing it for some period of time, and they're honest, they'll tell you exactly what I'm saying. They'll confirm for you exactly what I'm saying, which is that it is systematic, that it's planned, and that it amounts to a form of ethnic cleansing being carried out by the United States against their so-called minority communities. Members of the global majority are being targeted in the United States for extrajudicial killing and for incarceration, which then becomes slavery. Because once you're incarcerated, they put you to work, and you have to work for free, and you're working for private companies, for the profit interests of private enterprise. That's slavery, and you'll get a life sentence. So you're going to be a slave for the rest of your life. You don't even have a chance to be liberated from that slavery. At least in the old days, maybe there was a chance that you could escape. How are you going to escape from a maximum security prison? They've got you locked even more securely than if you had chains on your feet. This is the system that you have in the United States, and what you don't understand is that it's all a violation of international law. All of these statistics represent crimes, represent violations of the United Nations Charter, represent violations of the Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. It represents a violation on the Covenant for the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination, Racial Discrimination. It represents violations of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. For all of these things, the United States should be brought to the United Nations and should be subjected to sanctions, should be subjected to punishment by the international body, the one international body that is charged and has the mandate for the enforcement of international law. And those are just the most dramatic examples of the violations that only affect or disproportionately affect so-called minority communities in the United States. But all of you are affected. Every citizen in the United States is affected, unless you're a millionaire or a billionaire. You're affected, believe me. If you're a normal, average, working class citizen in the United States, you are hounded day and night by debt collectors, by bill collectors. You are living under the tyranny of your social security number and your credit report, which will determine what options you have in life. It will determine what you can own, what you can rent, or if you can rent, if you can get a job, if you can get a car, if you can get a house. You have a social credit system in the United States even more strict than they have in China. You pioneered it. China learned it from you, and theirs is more lenient than yours. This is all a violation of international law. They're not allowed to treat you like that because they made you poor. They're allowed to make you poor, but you're not allowed to be poor, apparently. This is a violation of international law. It's a violation, again, of the Covenant on Social and Political Rights. You don't even know what that is. You think the only law that applies to you is your Constitution. That's the only law that you think matters, the law of your state. And you have more laws in your country than any other country on earth, and you still call yourself the freest country in the world. You see how they've got your mind confused, how they've got you just turned around and upside down? You think you're the freest country in the world. Meanwhile, you have the most laws of any country in the world. You've got laws at the municipal level. You've got laws at the county level. You've got laws at the state level. You've got laws at the federal level. You've got laws inside the company that you work for. They'll decide whether or not you even get to go to the bathroom or not. You're subject to laws all the time, and your freedom is restricted drastically, and it's restricted in ways that are violations of international law. But they've got you, and they've kept you ignorant about what your rights are under international law. They want you to believe that when your rights are violated, or when you feel that your rights are violated, the only option that you have is to go for redress of your grievances to the one who's violating your rights. That's the system that they've set up for you. And you think it's normal. You think it's normal for it not to be safe to walk in the street. You think it's normal that you have neighborhoods in the United States where they have to put wood panels up against the windows because they're afraid of shootings, where people have to eat their dinner or eat their lunch, have their meals sitting on the floor because they don't want to be within the range of flying bullets. You think that's normal. That's not normal. It's not normal, and it's not legal. This is what you need to understand. You're supposed to have recourse to international law. But the reason you don't have recourse to international law is because your country dominates the one institution that is responsible for the enforcement of international law. Unfortunately, the world's sheriff is an outlaw. And so that outlaw gets to do whatever they want. They've legalized their own crimes. They've legalized their crimes against you. And they've normalized in your mind being victimized by your country, being victimized by your government, being victimized by your state, being victimized by the very police officers who are supposed to be protecting you. But that's not even the end of it. It's not even just about the police violence. It's not even about the violence that you are forced to live in on a daily basis in your American cities, but also even just something that you take absolutely as a given. You take this absolutely as a given, that they gather your data. They gather your personal data from all your devices, from all your computers and all your phones and whatnot. That they just gather it and there's nothing you can do about it. And they mass surveil you. Every single one of you is under mass surveillance. They watch your every move. They talk about China, but they're watching your every move. You tell me the last time you walked out of your house and took 5 steps and didn't see a CCTV camera. All of those CCTV cameras are connected to intelligence. They're connected to the police. They're connected to law enforcement and so forth. You're under their watchful eye every moment of your life. And that, by the way, is illegal. You have right to privacy. You have a right to your data. They don't have a right to take it from you. They don't have a right to collect it. They don't have a right to sell it. All of these matters have been determined and settled already according to international law. And America violates it every day because they know they can. Because they know that they dominate the United Nations. They dominate the one institution that, again, is charged with the enforcement of international law, which makes America above the law. That's one of the reasons why we're invoking Article 6. It's not just for the people around the world who are victimized by the United States. It's not just for everyone else around the world. It's for you too. Because you're never going to get your rights as long as you are under the boot of the United States, of your government, that doesn't even think that it has to treat you according to the law, because they think that their law is higher than international law. Well, they've got it backwards, and they've got it backwards in your mind, because you also think that if you're subject to international law, somehow that's against your interests, because you think American exceptionalism is for your sake. You're proud of American exceptionalism, but American exceptionalism only works if you're a millionaire or a billionaire or if you're in the government. Then it's only in your interests. But if you're a regular working class, rank and file American, American exceptionalism is the same, is the difference between being in general population in the prison or being in solitary confinement, where they don't have any cameras, where no one sees what they do to you, where you don't have anywhere to appeal. You can't talk to your embassy. You can't talk to you can't see a doctor. You can't see your lawyer. They've got you locked up in solitary confinement. That's what American exceptionalism means to the average American citizen in real life. That's nothing to be proud of. You should shake in your boots when anyone talks about American exceptionalism. This puts you in grave, grave danger. What it means is that America can treat you the same way it treats someone walking around in Baghdad, in Iraq. They can treat you the same way that they treat someone in Colombia. They can treat you the same way they treat someone in Philippines. They'll treat you the same way that they'll treat anyone in the global south. Anyone in the so-called global south and the so-called third world and the developing world, the colonized countries, they'll treat you just like you're a colonized people. They'll treat you exactly the same way, and they look at you the same way, and they'll treat you the same way. And the only thing that can save you, the only thing that can liberate you from that domination, from that tyranny, is if America is expelled from the United Nations, and then the United Nations is liberated from American domination, and then they can take your country to the United Nations and impose rehabilitative, punitive punishment on your country and hold them to account and force them to adhere to international law.